Good morning. I'm Andy Ford, President of the Florida Education Association, and I'm delighted to be in South Florida, and thank you very much for coming. With the continual changes in our state's education system, it's very difficult to have continuity and for things to continue. Joining me this morning is Clara Cook, Secretary-Treasurer of the Florida Education Association, Deborah Wilhelm, who is the President of the Palm Beach Classroom Teachers Association, Frederick Ingram, who is the President of United Teachers of Dade, Vanessa Tillman, who is the President of the St. Lucie Classroom Teachers Association Classified Unit, and Sharon Glickman, who is the President of the Broward Teachers Union and who was gracious enough to allow us to use her building this morning. So thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Today, the State Board of Education is meeting in Orlando, and the Florida Department of Education is proposing some minor changes to the grading and accountability system. Instead of listening to teachers, administrators, school districts, school boards, and parents, the state is proposing minor cosmetic changes that don't address the real concern of everyone involved in the educational community. FEA believes that all schools, public, charter, and private, that receive public funding should be held accountable for the teaching and learning and have the high standards and produce the rigorous results that we want from each and every school. FEA was one of the earliest supporters of a statewide assessment system, but since its development almost 15 years ago as a simple but effective diagnostic measure of student learning, the FCAT has been twisted and contorted into an all-encompassing arbitrator of total student performance, teacher evaluation and pay, and school quality. Today, testing results are badly misused. They are the basis for an incredible array of high-stakes decisions, including third grade promotion, high school graduation, class placement, and even whether a school is converted to a charter or stays open. The frequent changes in the school grading formula have confused parents and communities, and they have determined the school's instability that we are dealing with right now. Florida's school grading system was called an incomprehensible mess and a public policy train wreck by the Ocala Star-Banner newspaper last year, but they weren't the only ones. Many newspapers also had similar headlines as we ended last legislative session. The criticism is echoed largely because the formula to calculate school grades and the variables used have been continuously manipulated, making comparisons and value judgments about school quality, school grades, and teaching and learning absolutely meaningless. Today's proposed changes only add to the confusion. Florida needs to pause the madness. School grades are underpinned by high-stakes testing. Even with Education Commissioner's proposed grading simplification, grades will still be largely based on standardized tests, a test that has high stakes. The current climate is, how can we possibly grade schools but say there are no consequences? The false labeling of the grading system will drive mistaken beliefs and conclusions about our schools and the work of our educators and our students. Accurate, well understood, appropriately benchmarked data can be used to properly diagnose what is going on and measure student learning gains. Identify the proficiency levels of students and point out areas of weakness and much more. Sadly, it doesn't seem DOE and the State Board are willing to wait, be deliberate or rational. Without a reasonable phase-in of whatever the new test is that the DOE will select, how will Florida assure that the standards, the test, the teaching materials, the training to deliver this new instruction be aligned properly? How do we continue to grade schools and develop trust when Florida's educators are being told the assessment will not be field tested before the cut scores are even set and the consequences kick in? We should not forget that Florida's teachers don't even know what the test will be at this point. Yet there will be high-stakes decisions made on those tests. How can districts appropriately prepare for all the tests that need to be developed in the subjects that the state does not provide the testing for? FEA believes we must place an immediate moratorium on all school grades until identifiable, verifiable proof can be produced to demonstrate that Florida's A through F grading system is even valid. And we believe we must place a moratorium on the use of any form of the assessment based on new standards that are continually changing and being developed for high-stakes decisions, such as student promotion, teacher evaluation ratings, and performance pay. And that's not the only problem facing our state and our public schools. The governor is running all over the state touting a budget for education, but it doesn't meet the needs of our students. When his term of office began, his first budget had massive cuts to education. And the budget he is proposing now barely moves us to the investment that we need for Florida's students. And it doesn't even take us back to the level before he became governor. In fact, it remains less than what we had in the 2007-2008 school year. Since the budget 6 years ago, the legislature has piled on, and demanded more and more from our schools. And these mandates have been largely unfunded. These mandates vastly increase testing, demand much more time from our teachers, and they require training and technology that we do not have. Add to that, House Speaker Will Weatherford is on record as saying he's going to once again push for sweeping changes in the Florida retirement system. The Speaker and some of his colleagues continue to seek to dismantle the Florida retirement system, the system that is the best in the United States, that is considered well-funded and used as an example by other states on what they should actually develop and how they should go about utilizing the public funds to put into a retirement system for public employees. He wants to risk our retirement on something called a cash balance plan that has never been tried in the public sector. He says that employees will be taken care of. But how do we know what the impact will be for current retirees who are in the Florida retirement system and those of us that are too close to make changes before we enter the Florida retirement system? And we're also hearing that the Speaker of the House wants to exempt police officers, elected officials, and firefighters from all the new rules, which is an absolute slap in the face to Florida's public school teachers, custodians, cafeteria workers, and all the other public employees that it takes to operate our schools. If new employees are not going to replenish the system, it will ultimately threaten the financial stability for all of us that will be in the retirement system. This latest idea will only shift more of the burden to those in the system, and that includes more than 150,000 participants in the Florida retirement system in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties alone. While denying our new teachers and bus drivers and cafeteria workers the option to participate in the very successful Florida retirement system, he is going to take away our retirement security. It's difficult to understand why the politicians in Tallahassee are showing our public schools a lot less love, considering that Florida voters believe in our public schools and the people who work in them. A December survey of 800 registered voters found that 65% approve of the job of their public schools. 70% rate their teachers positively. 90% specifically say teachers are not the problem. 2/3 say teachers are paid too little. And nearly 70% say the legislature should leave the Florida retirement system alone. Those numbers I just quoted were statewide numbers. Here in South Florida, there is even more support for our public schools. Florida's teachers and other school employees are truly honored by the support we receive from parents and our communities. But We don't see politicians reflecting the will of the voters when it comes to public schools. Properly funding our public schools is a sound investment in our future as a state, and it should be done. Listening to teachers, school employees, administrators, and school boards about the constant changes in the system and what's needed to make our schools progress only makes sense, yet the people in Tallahassee aren't listening. Why don't our leaders listen? We have the expertise. A teacher knows what students are getting it and what students aren't. They don't need massive testing structures to demonstrate that. What we need is to hit the pause button and once again figure out and build an accountability system that works and leave it alone. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes?
Can you give some examples of the proposed changes to the accountability system that students get problems?
The commissioner today is talking about taking away the parts of the formula that deal with advanced placement courses, not looking at the SAT scores, and removing the triggers that automatically require a school grade to fall one letter grade. That doesn't really address the situation that we're dealing with.
You mentioned that they're cosmetic, or are they cosmetic in a good way, in a bad way?
They're cosmetic, and it is a good way. I mean, it is making it better, but it's still not doing what's needed. Because right now, teachers are teaching the Common Core standards, yet the test is being given on the standards that we used to use. And there are some correlations, but they're not a lot. And that there's confusion there. And then next year, we have a different test that we don't even know what it is yet. And yet, our students are going to be held accountable for those results. Especially, in third grade, you don't go to fourth grade if you don't pass the test. That's an awful lot of things to do on a system that hasn't been tried or even tested. Because by the time we give the test next year, it will not be field tested. We don't know if it's valid, and we don't know what the consequences for the kids are going to be because we don't know if it's valid.
Did you say the same thing about Common Core as a curriculum? All the things that you can do in terms of us not knowing if it's valid or what the assessment is?
Absolutely. Basically what we're doing is we're building an airplane, and it's going to crash because you can't build an airplane while it's flying. You've got to build it on the ground. You have to see if it works first before you put the first passengers on and you take off. Common Core and the testing that we're using doesn't do that.
What about just the growing opposition to Common Core as a curriculum? Is FDA supportive of Core?
Well, at this point, there's standards. It's not a curriculum. So we're supportive of the standards. The implementation, we believe, has been a mess, and it needs to be fixed. What we need to do is have time for things to move from the old system to the new system and make sure that what we're doing is good for kids. I went through school, and I can remember being in elementary school when we went from arithmetic to modern math. Two total different concepts. I got lost. And that's what's going to happen to kids all over this state if we're not careful.
Do you have any concerns about the standards in terms of them being unproven and supposed to raise the issue of with the early grades maybe that they're developmentally inappropriate? There have been some credible folks who have raised credible issues about Common Core.
There was a lot of work that went into Common Core. There were teachers that were interviewed. The experts went and wrote standards. Those standards came back to teachers. Teachers reviewed them. They threw some out. They made some changes. I'm not saying that each and every one of the 17,000 standards make sense at the grade level, because they may not. But a teacher doesn't have to use all the standards. If he or she doesn't believe that that's appropriate for a second grader, then move on and do something else. The idea behind Common Core is to give teachers the opportunity to focus on a skill long enough for a kid to master that skill. Right now, if you walked into a school, you most likely would find, if you went to the third grade wing, every kid on the same page in the math book in every single third grade classroom. That's not how children learn, and that's not what we should be doing. Common Core, is hated from the right and hated from the left for different reasons. Basically, if we would look at the standards and develop a system and allow teachers the time to move to it, I think people would see that it's much better for our kids because it allows them to think deeper and not just get a number in order to bubble it. Anybody else?
Good question.
Sure.
Which is, with the A4S system, one of the things that we noticed is that low poverty schools never get user F grade ever. And there is a strong correlation when it comes to socioeconomic makeup of the students and what the better grades end up being. Is the system fair? Does it discriminate based on income or in any other way?
I think if we look at the school grading system from the very beginning, we see that it reflects the economic level of the neighborhood. The situation that we have is one where, by law, we are not allowed to look at poverty. And anybody who believes that poverty doesn't affect absolutely every part of your life is really missing it and has never worked or lived in poverty. And the school grades just reflect the zip codes. We can predict the school, if we were going to do the school grades on the original formula, we can predict what neighborhoods right today are going to have what grade pretty much. We will know the A's and we will know the F's, and it has to do with economics. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.